Well, for more on all of this, let's bring in Stephen Okun, the CEO of APAC Advisors, a geopolitical consultancy, joining us from Singapore. Stephen, thanks for your time. This is another upending of global trade, unbelievably. But what is your biggest takeaway on the impact it will have on countries that have already done one of these tariff deals with the US?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, there's four types of tariffs right now. There's these international emergency tariffs. They're gone. Then you have the national security tariffs, the unfair trade practice tariffs, and now these balance of payment tariffs. The question is, what happens to a country like Malaysia or Indonesia, which has agreed to tariffs? They agreed to 19%. Does that mean that 19% holds? While a country like Vietnam, which didn't agree to anything yet, goes down to 10%. If that's the case, if the tariffs hold on Malaysia and Indonesia because they agreed to them, they are going to be much worse off because, look, trade and tariffs are relative. And if you're disadvantaged to your next door neighbor, you're in trouble. And that is why Malaysia and Indonesia and Japan and Korea and everyone else is trying to figure out what's going on, especially those countries which have signed agreements or have signed agreements, and maybe they haven't ratified them yet, but have signed agreements with Donald Trump.
Stephen, you talk about these agreements all being relative, so I guess there'll be some very worried people right now that they have agreed to a deal that they may not be able to walk back. How destabilising is this sort of back forth on these tariffs to those other countries or to the global economy?
Well, they're certainly to the global economy, not so much, because these tariffs are relatively minor. If you look at the broader economy, you look at U.S.-China trade, U.S.-EU trade, China, Korea trade, none of that is going to be impacted when you're talking about a country like Malaysia or Indonesia or Vietnam. The question is, what are those governments going to do? If the government agreed, are they now going to tell Donald Trump, oh, by the way, you didn't have authority when you were negotiating with us, we're not going to agree with you anymore? Then they've got to be worried about Donald Trump's reaction. Now, if they're paying more than their neighbors, they have to be worried about that economically. And how do you balance the domestic pressures if you're in Kuala Lumpur or Jakarta, since your opponents are going to say you traded away the farm for little or nothing? So there's a lot of consternation going on in Southeast Asia, a lot of questions on trade. What happens when these reciprocal tariffs get refunded? Do the refunds come back here to Southeast Asia? Because a lot of manufacturers in Southeast Asia ate those tariffs because they couldn't all be passed on to the consumer right away. So there's trade issues, there's economic issues, there are political issues.
OK, I've got to ask you about these refunds because Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh has already said this is going to be a mess, $120 billion. Do you see any of this money realistically being refunded?
The money's going to go at some point. The money's going to go from the United States Treasury to the importer of record who paid the tariff. Now, the question is, what do they do with it? Do they have a contract with the manufacturers here in Asia and said, if we get the money back, you get some of the money back? What of those exporters did sign a contract and others didn't? What about the customer who's now going to say, you pass that on to me, you should be giving me that back? That's going to be the mess. I think Justice Kavanaugh might have been overstating it when it came for the Treasury to refund the money, because the Treasury knows and Customs knows where that money came from. It's what did those people do with the money? So, yeah, it is going to be a mess to unwind all of this. And then furthermore, some of those exporters, they sold the right to that refund. So if you're a firm that bought those rights, maybe 20 cents, 30 cents on the dollars, some people here are going to make a lot of money too.
Can we go back to Donald Trump? Because, of course, all of this comes down to the art of the deal and the negotiation. And he's clearly not prepared to swallow this as a defeat. He is losing revenue. He's been constrained by his power. You're a geopolitical consultant. What would you advise countries or countries looking to help out companies doing trade with America do in this circumstance?
Sit back and wait and see what happens, because there's a lot the United States is going to need to do. Donald Trump certainly has a lot of tariff authority. And there's all this talk, well, we're going to put 10% tariffs on in the next couple days to make up for the IEEPA tariffs that have been overruled. But those tariffs can only last for 150 days. And then Congress has to extend that. And this Congress, in an election year, is not going to extend that. So one, sit tight and see what happens politically in Washington. Second, while he does have a tariff authority for national security reasons, for unfair trade practice reasons, there is a formal process that has to be followed. And the government knows how to do this. The government, the United States, has done this against China, and that's why a lot of the China tariffs are going to stay. But are they going to be able to do this type of review and investigation and documentation against every country all at once? Of course not. So you want to sit back and wait and see what happens if you are a country, and frankly, if you're a business, because it is going to be a mess, as Justice Kavanaugh said.
Stephen, thanks so much for your time. That's Stephen Okun joining us from Singapore.